You are listening to PopXcast, where science fiction meets pop culture.
My father, just like your dad, he is a huge Star Trek fan, and I never really got attached to the characters like he did until later on. So once I saw the 2009 film, which is one of my favorite sci-fi movies, top 10 ever, I love that film. I found myself sucked into this universe, so I decided to go back and watch the first few cinematic outings. And I enjoyed, most of them. There are a few hit and misses, but for the most part, I like them. I think Wrath of Khan, for its time, was a revolutionary sci-fi film. So I loved. I also enjoyed Into Darkness, which for some reason most Star Trek fans don't seem to enjoy. Most that I've seen on the internet don't seem to enjoy Into Darkness. I guess because of how similar it was to Wrath of Khan. But I found it very fresh, and I liked the interpretation. I liked how they retold certain story points from Wrath of Khan. They did it in a fresh new way. But what I think Beyond does better than those other two films in this new timeline is mix what fans love from the old Star Trek with the fresh new flavor that JJ invented. I think Lynn did a great job directing. I think this one felt more like Star Trek, whereas JJ's movies felt similar to Star Wars. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I love them, obviously. But it was a very refreshing film. And for a summer that's been that's been really disappointing when it comes to movies, Beyond is easily in my top 5 favorite movies of the year. I'll have to sit and think about that one, but probably top 3, 4. And I think a sequel to this movie is well deserved. And for some reason, these films have yet to crack $100 million opening weekend. Why? I think America needs to go out and see these movies, because these are great, well-made films with a great director, 2 great directors, and a wonderful cast. Some of my key points is I think Chris Pine is slowly becoming the definition of the captain of the Enterprise. He is slowly coming into his own, because you start out, you see him as a younger guy, and he's messing around, he's doing these rebellious things. This movie, to me, it seemed like he was, for the most part, no nonsense. This guy was straightforward, and he was the captain. And I think in the next movie, we're going to see that progress even more, because, as we all know, Chris Hemsworth has been cast in the next movie, and he played Captain Kirk's father in the first 5 minutes of the first Star Trek. So I think that is going to give him even more, character development and get him to be an even better captain than he already is. I think Bones and Spock had some great chemistry in this movie. It was odd to see it because we've not seen that from them in the first 2 films, but I think their chemistry was wonderful. And as Joe said, I think Nimoy, he really pulled on heartstrings, all the stuff that had to do with him, because they did a great job memorializing his character. Doing spoilers, so when you see young Spock hold that photo up at the main end, and you see him looking at the old cast and crew.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was such a really good point that I have to stop you. That how it meshes the generation gap between yesteryear and today. And you're right, it did pull on the heartstrings of the beloved people who follow this franchise and this legacy and this lore of Star Trek.
Yes.
And it was a somber moment at the end when Spock was holding that picture, and it was heart-wrenching, because it's the end. It's kind of the closing of the end of one book and the opening of a new, so to speak. But I'll let you continue on.
Yeah, man, that's absolutely, that was the definitive moment, in my opinion, that made this film what it was. I mean, it was, like you said, closing the old Star Trek timeline and basically opening up this brand new one to where they can continue to push out these amazing films. I only have 2 more points left. And to me, these 2 points are a big deal, because it's one of those rare films that gets better with every act. I started out, I was like, you know what, I'm kind of digging this, right? As in the other Star Treks, it's kind of consistent all the way through. But this film just continues to escalate. And by the end of the 3rd act, and we'll get into Idris Elba's character in just a second, but by the end of the 3rd act, when everybody comes into their own, and you find out, some motivations that weren't very clear in the beginning, and you see those amazing epic actions. I feel like this film progressed, and that's one of the reasons that it's one of my favorite films of the year. And my final point is, Idris Elba is one of the best actors in the business. He is consistently being cast in almost everything, and he should have been nominated last year for his Netflix movie, which was phenomenal. But he was a great villain. Now, he started out, he was a little, I was like, this is kind of like a cliche villain, what he's doing. But when you find out that he was a part of that old crew, right, and you find out what his motivations truly were, suddenly, boom, he became one of my favorite villains of the year. And he made this movie absolutely what it was.
And it was so heartfelt and so tied to a tangible story that he was abandoned on this planet by himself with the crew of the Franklin, and he's the only one that survived. And somehow through alien symbiote and some kind of technology was able to sustain his life. And that entity or whatever it was took over his mind and his form. But at the end of it, between what I thought was really cool is we gave you a spoiler alert warning, but at the end of it, we see the battle between him and James T. Kirk, and he's actually wearing the gold captain uniform. And so it's captain versus captain at the end of it. And it was just so iconic and climactic. I was like, wow, this is really a good culmination. And I did not expect him to be a former captain of Starfleet. I did not see that coming at all.
Huge reveal, for sure.
Captain's log supplemental.
PopXcast. Hasta la vista, baby.